When you have a demand shock, price rises. And that's what we're seeing. But now we're about to have a supply shock. Right now, we're buying 3 times the current production. That'll turn to 6 times the current production. But here's the problem. That's only 6 times current production if the miners actually sell. But a couple of the miners actually were buying.
In the wake of the GBT-induced weeks of panic, confusion, and mistrust sell-off, investors are seeing a positive and exciting turn in the Bitcoin industry. Again, the price of one Bitcoin has increased by 12 in the last 5 days, 64 in the last 6 months, and 12.6 in the last year, reaching a current level of $448,000 per coin. The S&P 500, which is also at record highs, has increased by just 21.50 in the past year and 12.60 in the past half year. According to Eric Balunas, a senior ETF analyst at Bloomberg, the phenomenal success of the newly issued spot Bitcoin ETFs is to blame for this continuing run. The Bloomberg analyst recently tweeted a chart showing how successful these launches have been. He says out of 5,535 ETF debuts in 30 years, these 25 had the most assets after only 1 month on the market. There are only 2 days left for BlackRock's IBIT and Fidelity's FBTC, 2 funds that are completely out of this world with assets of over $3 billion apiece. Bitwise's BitBen ARCs were also included. Eric adds to the success of the top Bitcoin ETFs relative to others on the list by sharing another important metric in a subsequent tweet. This is literally unprecedented, he says. While some funds, notably Bitos at 90, TBR Gold shares at 35, have seen daily inflows since debut, BlackRock and Fidelity have seen inflows every day. In the most recent episode of Blockworks Macro's Weekly Roundup, Mark Yusko stresses the importance of these landmarks and how they may affect Bitcoin values in the weeks preceding the 2024 hang. Although prices have been unpredictable so far this week, Mark predicts they will grow even more irrational as the event approaches and then hit rock bottom following the hype. Regarding this for months prior to the final approval which we achieved. Incidentally, we were off by 2 or 3 days, but other than that, we were spot on. I mean, there's this 2-step procedure and people still haven't gotten it. This sailor-like hunger isn't an isolated incident. Rather, it's part of the demand shock. Michael, on the other hand, was more like a dinosaur or python in that he would chomp once, digest, and chew again. Also, this is more like, the most ravenous jungle cat that hunts and eats not every day, but every week. With the resistance from those in charge, this is going to drag on for a long time, isn't it? Yeah, that's not welcome here, according to everyone who's on the side of the Warren family. These new exchange-traded funds are not welcome, and gradually that will crumble, and the amount of money attempting to squeeze through the gate will rise. It is the halving cycle that causes the 4-year cycle to occur. There is a hard-coded halving cycle as well that is here to stay. This led to the demand shock. Yes, that is exactly what I meant. Did we not experience the demand shock? Now that we have their stamp of approval, the common person can start purchasing goods. In the Fidelity Broad portfolio, it is now allocated between 1 and 3%. Based on their strategic approach, they have one ETF that is comprised of all their other ETFs. Additionally, they hold 1/1 FPTC and have a weighted of 1/3. A demand shock causes prices to spike. That much is true. We are witnessing that. However, a supply shock is imminent and a supply shock is sure to follow, regardless of the day, whether it's 417, 418s, or folks hoping for 420. This is really taking place. Plus, we're cutting down from 900 to 450 per day. We are purchasing 3 times the current production at the current rate of inflows. As a result, output will increase by a factor of 6. But now we get to the issue. Assuming the miners make a sale, that's just 6 times the production level. A small number of the miners, however, were making purchases. Seriously, they weren't just ignoring their power bills. They were out shopping. Well, obviously that won't last forever. People are only adding to their savings accounts in anticipation of this shift, therefore it's just a speculative move. The concept of treasury is another one that doesn't receive nearly enough attention. You have MicroStrategy, which is obviously his most valuable asset. He has effectively become his own Bitcoin bank. On the other hand, some businesses have been adding to their Bitcoin holdings in a covert manner. For example, Morgan Creek does. We may not be Sailor, but we carry it. Part of Putin's remarks in the interview were exactly this. By imposing sanctions on countries that use the dollar as a weapon, you turn the sanctions targets against each other. Oh, and I absolutely adore the name you gave it. Twitter. Much obliged. Twitter is a better name than X. His claim is that he provided the figures, but that is not my point. I believe he mentioned 5 years in yuan, with 34 being in dollars for Russia. The dollar accounts for $13 trading today, while the yuan makes for 34. Thus, whose economic clout is growing, there is a lot of money floating around. Thus, it's reasonable to assume that the world reserve currency, which is similar to the 1971 petrodollar standard, is accurate. The choice by politicians to impose sanctions and pressure on these other nations is undermining that. To take, for example, the comparison of Iran's oil output before and after the sanctions. Why, though? They will discover another market for their oil. Does the United States truly adhere to the values of liberty, taxes, and inflation? Was that independence? Currently, which nation does not impose some form of taxation? Is the repression of a large population by means of the systematic depletion of their purchasing power caused by inflation. Just as you mentioned, inflation can be controlled. The years 1776, 1913, when the Republic was founded, were devoid of inflation. The U.S. did not experience any systematic inflation. I simply want to make a point about the class system. Many people's financial futures are in the balance because of the choices being made by a small group of people. Respond to the lockdowns. That was the largest redistribution of wealth in human history, from the general populace to an extremely small few. The recipients of $3.07 trillion are the, I hate to use the term, the billionaire class. Unsustainable was even used by Ms. Yellen, who is considered one of the main issues. Additionally, I do not feel good about listening to our leadership discuss economic decisions. And when I witness the effects myself, I can't help but laugh at the CEO of McDonald's, who claimed that, according to their own statistics, families with incomes below $45,000 are cutting out McDonald's altogether due to financial constraints. If you insist on thinking it's all a coincidence, like the runaway train, then I can see your point. A chain reaction of seemingly insignificant incidents led to the train's unintentional acceleration to 80 miles per hour. We are able to accept that. Another option is to assume the existence of purpose. Plus, I frequently brought up this topic, Dictator Playbook 101. There are several historical examples of people who achieved absolute power in this way. So what's your job? You starve the populace to death before rewarding them with goodies in return for their votes. Additionally, I will assert, and this is merely my personal viewpoint, that this is indeed the case at the present time.